Hello, welcome back everybody to another Nutty Ninja tutorial. This time it is going to be on Squishies by popular demand. To get the formalities out of the way first, make sure you're commenting or sending me messages via Twitch or Discord and telling me what types of techniques or tracks I should talk about next. So what you're looking at here is the track that I created myself called Squishy Training. It can be found on Track Central, and it is a really good resource to use, I think, in general, Track Central, to find tracks that have techniques that are a lot more difficult to perform and to practice. This first squishy that you're looking at now is a very basic form that requires you to do it all in one go, and in essence, a squishy is dragging your back wheel across an obstacle to either gain more vertical or horizontal height. While you drag your back wheel across the corner of an obstacle, you're generating enough potential energy to perform a bunny hop off of it. The second checkpoint I set up is meant to be a slide and a squish combined into one type of obstacle. So if you try to slide this like I'm doing now, you're not going to get enough distance to land properly on the checkpoint above. Instead, what you need to do is as you're sliding up this platform, you lean back when you reach the apex of the slide and do a bunny hop. Performing a slide into a squish such as this checkpoint can allow you to land on tough angles. You will even see this move be performed when a lot of people speedrun and try to keep their back wheel and just their bike in contact with the ground for as much time as possible. Airtime is not your friend when speedrunning, so effectively squishing in essence will increase your skill level drastically. Alright, onto one of the more traditional types of squishies that you can see on Ninja Tracks. This type of squish is used in scenarios where there's either a bomb, a ceiling, or if the angle is just really steep from the previous platform and you can't gain enough distance even when you go full throttle, lean forward. This is pretty similar to the very first checkpoint, but you need to drop your front wheel a lot lower over the platform to be able to get that horizontal distance this time. A common problem that I have myself and I see a lot of other people struggle with when doing this technique on rising in particular is the engine gets caught on the edge of obstacles. To combat against this problem, I end up focusing on the front wheel first, and then as my front wheel dips over the top, I change my focus to the engine. Here's yet another problem you may find yourself in when trying to do squishies. So, a lot of the time when you don't clear that engine, you're going to get wedged, and the way to get out of it is you just wiggle back and forth, and then you pop, lock, and drop that front wheel out of that wedge, regain your balance, easy peasy. Next checkpoint, very similar type of squishy, but in this case, we got a lot more distance to cover and into a fender grab. Another important detail about this is when you're fender grabbing a narrow obstacle, you can hit your head or your back on objects. So be careful whenever you land on it, especially when you're leaning back, because the momentum is going to carry you and you're just going to slam straight into the wall. One other cool technique I can tell you about is doing a tuck. And so when you do a tuck, you lean back really quickly. If you feel like you didn't spin the bike fast enough when you're in the air, tuck that rider in. Makes it a lot easier to grab a fender. Alright, going back to this squishy, you got to get that front wheel very far out in front of you, almost to the point where your bike is parallel with the ground. The next squish that we have included for my squishy training track is a vertical squish. Now, this is a very difficult technique, and it's something that I wanted to include because I didn't really learn how to do it for a very long time, so I hope that this will help others that are trying to improve to like ninja level 4 to 5s. This is typically a very high level technique. So to start off, I want to say that there is a lot of other techniques that are included with a vertical squish. You have to know how to lean properly, how to half lean in particular is a really important aspect to when you're snapping that back wheel into the wall. The problem with fully leaning back on a vertical squish is you can catch the engine on the corner when you're performing it. So the half lean will negate that by keeping your momentum going more vertical instead of horizontal. Throttle control is another important aspect to performing vertical squishies. It's kind of a given. When you're going into a vertical, it's expected to have some form of throttle control, but when you're landing on a type of angle like this, try to feather the throttle. What I mean by feathering the throttle is when you grip the wall, you have a short burst of throttle, then you release the throttle, but not all the way, and then you reapply that throttle yet again, but in a way that you hardly move the triggers. Lastly, there is an optional type of technique you can do to, I think, give yourself an advantage when you're going into a vertical squish, and that is a brake climb. Knowing how to brake climb effectively at the beginning will help keep the momentum as you do that half lean, that half squish into the vertical. But keep in mind, not all vertical squishies have a brake climb before them. The next type of checkpoint we got here is a squishy bounce, a squonce. I don't know if that's the proper name, but I guess I'm going to call it that right now. A squonce is used on platforms that you cannot stop on and that you need to generate that bunny hop off of a squishy to effectively get as much distance and height as you possibly can. This can also be very challenging. I think that it comes with a lot of practice, as with everything. I think learning new techniques comes with practice, of course, but being able to land leaning forward, leaning back while dragging the back wheel only across a high-angled platform, and then getting a bunny hop, getting all of that timing each step in a row is challenging. So please, as you are trying to practice this technique and all the other ones, do not be disheartened by it. Just know that it is a grind, and the practice will pay off eventually, and you'll be slapping those ninjas around like it's nothing. The next checkpoint is another type of squishy bounce, but it is going to be off of a curved ramp this time. As you try to do this type of checkpoint, keep in mind it is way easier to perform if you do it all in one. And as you're doing it, focus on absorbing that back wheel on the giant cylinder and performing a bunny hop off of the top of it all in one motion. If you're trying to look for a harder challenge, try to stop and squish off of the second cylinder. If you've made it to the very end of this track, congrats. You've made it to now the hardest technique out of all of the squishies, in my opinion. This one is a flat ground squish, and what I'm doing here is I'm working on my balancing. So I think it's important to note you should be able to hold a wheelie leaning forward to set up properly for a flat ground squish. But let me explain what a flat ground squish is very quickly. It is basically getting as much horizontal distance as you possibly can on a jump. What you'll notice me doing at the very beginning is letting my front wheel drop very low to the ground, but you can't let your front wheel touch because I made this a back wheel only obstacle to force people into a flat ground squish. If this was both wheels enabled, you'd be able to make this jump by just doing a regular bunny hop with both wheels, but that would defeat the purpose of this whole thing. If you know how to do a flat ground squish effectively, this is the most optimal way to get distance on your jumps. When dropping your front wheel at about this position, I'd say maybe 25-30 degrees, you start to accelerate, and only hold the lean forward for a split second. Drop that front wheel as low to the ground as possible, lean back, and do a very large hop. While you're in the air, it helps to pump the bike so it can raise the back wheel a little bit more and land on the platform better. I don't want to spoil anybody's fun, but this is seriously the hardest technique that took me to get down. If it takes you 100 tries to get this, I'd be impressed, to say the least, because this took me hundreds, if not thousands of tries for me to get it consistent and to actually get a feel for it. I think that's everything I can talk about with squishies. I hope this helps you guys, and let me know if I missed anything covering squishies. That's going to be it for me, guys. Make sure to comment on other tracks or techniques I should cover. Hope I see you guys in the next video or the stream. Peace.